Let me begin this video by asking you guys a question. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Formula 1? For me, it's the highest level of motorsports competition. When I first fell in love with it, I was privileged enough to witness Sebastian Vettel become the youngest world champion of all time in 2010. During that season, Seb had never led the world championship at any point before the showdown in Abu Dhabi. Despite being down by 25 points with 2 races to go, Vettel made the comeback of his life to beat Fernando Alonso to the title by just 4 points. He did everything that was required of him to win by executing the race to perfection. Sound familiar? I think you know where I'm going with this. Now let's go back to the question I asked initially. We can argue that Formula 1 is more than just competitive motor racing. It's entertainment, or some might call it show business. At the end of the day, the fans are the ones that make the spectacle. The level of passion and excitement just goes to show how amazing the sport can be. But entertainment should never be prioritized over the sport itself. This year we had arguably the greatest championship battle in the history of Formula 1, featuring none other than the 2 best drivers on the grid in Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. The 2 went back and forth all season and found themselves equal on points heading into the season finale. Perfect scenario. No calculations needed, no Max wins the championship if this happens, or Lewis wins the championship if that happens. Just a straight up head-to-head, winner-takes-all scenario. For 57 laps, Hamilton dominated the Grand Prix. Yes, he did run into a bit of trouble when he encountered Sergio Perez, but for the most part, he was in control, doing exactly what he needed to do to win a record-breaking 8th world title. But on the final lap of the race, Verstappen made a last-minute overtake for the lead heading into turn 5 to win the first world title of his career. Talk about drama, right? I mean, the last championship to be won on the last lap was at the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2008. Max taking the title in 2021 was historic for several reasons. He not only became the first Dutch world champion in Formula 1 history, but also the only non-Mercedes driver to win a title in the turbo hybrid era. Verstappen also became one of only 4 drivers to win a championship at age 24 or under, and delivered Red Bull's first driver's title in 8 seasons. But what if I told you that the final race was rigged purely for entertainment purposes? Make no mistake, this whole fiasco had nothing to do with Max. If you look at his performance over the course of the season, he was easily the most consistent driver, and this can be backed up by statistics. Verstappen finished either first or second in every single race in 2021 where he didn't DNF or suffer mechanical damage. His average finishing position in all races he completed this season ranks 3rd among all average finishing positions in the turbo hybrid era. But this next one quite literally blew my mind. Max led a total of 652 laps in 2021, which is more than any other driver on the grid, including Hamilton, combined. If that doesn't go to show just how exceptional Verstappen's performance was in his first ever championship battle, then I don't know what does. We always knew this guy was destined for greatness the moment he entered the sports. His fearlessness, mental strength, and sheer raw speed were the main attributes that stood out to me when watching him as a rookie back in 2015. Since then, he has built upon and expanded his skill set to become one of the most well-rounded drivers on the grid. He's not perfect yet. I still believe he goes over the limit when racing wheel to wheel. But for a guy who's still just 24 years old, he is performing way beyond his years. But on Sunday the 12th of December at the Yas Marina circuits, Lewis Hamilton was robbed of the race win and the world championship. Now, if you're a new fan watching this and don't fully understand how everything played out, let me give you a quick rundown. On lap 53, Nicholas Latifi crashed out of the race, which brought out the safety car. At this point, Hamilton had built up a 12-second gap to Verstappen, and with just 5 laps to go, that advantage was about to be wiped out. Now when there's a safety car, it's very easy to make a cheap pit stop and not lose any time, especially when there's a large enough gap to the car behind. As Max had almost a 30-second advantage over Checo in 3rd, he made a stop for a brand new set of soft tyres. This would have been effective had he come out directly behind Hamilton with no lapped cars in between. But crucially, there were a total of 5 lapped cars separating the 2 championship protagonists. Article 48.12 of the sporting regulation states, any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. Once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. However, Michael Masi didn't follow these rules at all. Instead of allowing all 8 lapped cars to overtake the safety car, only the 5 between Hamilton and Verstappen were given permission to do so. What's more is that back in October last year for the Eiffel Grand Prix, Masi stated, and I quote, "There's a requirement in the sporting regulations to waive all lapped cars past." Essentially, he contradicted himself. Had he allowed all lapped cars to overtake in this case, the safety car would have returned to the pits on the following lap, meaning the championship would have ended under those conditions. However, apparently, there's been a long-standing agreement made by all the teams that, if possible, the races should be settled under green flag conditions and not behind the safety car. Understandable. But if it means going against what the regulations say, then it no longer becomes a possibility. Championships have ended under the safety car in the past, with the most recent one being 2012. What this entire mess tells me, and what most of you have observed, is that Masi's intention was to simply give the people what they wanted to see, an epic grandstand finish on the final lap of the race. I'm sorry, that's not sport. That's reality TV. And if this is the way the FIA will be conducting their affairs from now on, then I fear for the future of Formula 1. May the best man win is what everyone said heading into the weekend. Well, the truth is, the best man did not win the Grand Prix. Lewis was by no means perfect this year. He made a pretty big mistake in Imola where he would have lost a lot more points had it not been for the red flag. An off weekend in Monaco saw him finish 7th while Verstappen dominated. Then there was the brake magic saga in Baku where he missed out on an easy win with his rival out of the race. But for the most part, Hamilton was formidable, especially when it mattered most. At the very first race in Bahrain, keeping Verstappen at bay after such a dismal preseason testing was spectacular. His performances in Portugal and Spain were equally as impressive before he went on a win drought for 5 races. Silverstone was controversial, but it was still a mighty comeback drive after being awarded a 10-second penalty. He made history in Russia by becoming the first driver to win 100 races, and after a devastating loss at the Mexican Grand Prix, where Verstappen won by 17 seconds, many believed Hamilton's championship hopes had come to an end. Add to that the disqualification from qualifying in Brazil, and almost everybody had written him off at this point. But as he's shown time and time again in his career, he thrived on the adversity. From last to 5th in the sprint race, and from 10th to 1st in the main race, Hamilton executed arguably the perfect weekend when his back was against the wall. He made it a hat-trick of wins by taking victories in Qatar and Jeddah to bring himself equal on points with Max. Despite starting on the harder compound tyre, he jumped Verstappen off the line with a reaction time a full 10th of a second quicker than the Dutchman. He was controlling the race exceptionally well, until the FIA decided to scrap the rulebook and hand an unfair advantage to the man who simply didn't have an answer. The fact of the matter is, Lewis Hamilton was robbed of an 8th World Championship. Again, I want to reiterate this had nothing to do with Verstappen. This year, Max showed his true colours. He was a warrior. Every time he got knocked down, he'd get right back up and fight harder than before. He and Lewis gave us what might go down as the greatest head-to-head battle of all time. But ultimately, the way the finale was decided was corrupt and dishonourable to the integrity of the sport. Even the other drivers who weren't involved in the title fight recognised that what went down was underhanded. Lewis brought his A game, drove his heart out, and did his talking on the track. Given Mercedes' recent decision not to protest, the FIA will reanalyze the entire situation behind closed doors. They're going to get away with manipulating the final outcome, but people most definitely won't forget this controversy for a long time to come. I hope you all enjoyed. If you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on bell notifications to keep up to date with my latest videos in the future. If you liked this video, then be sure to also share it around with others who you think might enjoy it as well. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.